Good afternoon. Today is February 11th, 2025, and this is the bill hearings for the Ways and Means Committee. We have 20 bills today. The majority of individuals have moved to virtual testimony, seeing as how we are expecting a snowstorm. So I would ask everybody's patience and indulgence and grace, because we don't know what's going to happen virtually, and we'll be trying to find people and all of that. We haven't done full-on virtual, I think, since COVID. But we do have a couple people in here, so clap it up for the people that are here. Okay, so first we will call House Bill 726. Delegate Weibel, come on up. And we have, okay, so we'll let Delegate Weibel go for questions, and then Mr. Canali is with us virtually. He's unfavorable, but we'll have.
All right, thank you. Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and honorable members of the Ways and Means Committee, I'm Delegate Weibel, and I'm pleased to present House Bill 726, Homestead Property Tax Credit, which alters the applicability of the Homestead Property Tax Credit. House Bill 726 would extend the credit to all residences in the state, not just those that are utilized as a property owner's principal residence. Per the fiscal note, approximately an additional 700,000 accounts would be eligible for the assessment cap, bringing the total to 1.9 million homes statewide. Numerous bills are introduced in this legislature every year seeking to either cap or limit the amount that rents may increase in the state, with the intent of making rents more affordable. Along with mortgage, principal and interest payments, and insurance, property taxes are a material component of rent and rent increases. This bill addresses an issue of fairness. How fair is it that two identical properties can be assessed as substantially different amounts, with one property's assessment being limited to 10% or lower, while an identical property enjoys a 40% increase in its assessment? This bill looks to use and extends the same benefit that an owner-occupied resident is afforded to a home that is occupied by a renter. Average residential assessment increases this past cycle range from a low of 14.7% in Charles County to a high of 37.7% in Somerset County. Washington County, my county of residence, has experienced an average 34.3% increase in residential assessments this past cycle. The average statewide increase in residential assessments was over 21%. Assessment values have increased consistently since the year 2014. For the past three reassessment cycles, assessments have increased an average of 20.6, 23.4, and 20.1% respectively. 611,000 of the 630,000, or almost 97% of the residential improved properties, increased in value in the January 2025 reassessment. Assessment caps for owner-occupied properties are established by each county in Baltimore City. These caps range from a low of 0% in Talbot County to a high of 10% in Calvert, Montgomery, and Somerset counties. As a result of the existing homestead tax credit, an estimated $44 billion is being removed from the $1.03 trillion county statewide taxable assessable base for July 1 of 2025. The total taxable county assessable base is projected to increase from $971 billion to $1.03 trillion in the most recent assessment cycle. Commercial assessments, railroad personal property, utility operating, real and personal property, and business personal property are all unaffected by this legislation, and this bill seeks to provide relief to landlords and ultimately tenants, Marylanders, who occupy these properties. Property tax assessments are increasing at astronomical rates. The Chamber of Commerce in its 2024 Competitiveness Red Book ranks Maryland as 45th in the business tax climate, with the 6th highest in residential tax rates and the 10th highest burden among all states in local taxes. This bill attempts to apply a reasonable and fair approach to those increases for residents. all Maryland residents. Assessments will still increase under this proposed legislation, and contrary to claims, counties and the state would still experience healthy increases in their property tax revenues as the caps are set by the local jurisdictions. MML states that the entire concept behind the homestead property tax credit was to protect owner-occupied properties so their tax burden does not price them out of their homes, end of quote. That is the exact point I'm trying to make with this legislation. I ask you, is it okay then to price renters out of their homes? For these reasons, I thank you and ask for a favorable report on House Bill 726.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Weibel? Okay, we will go to Mr. Canali for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Kevin Canali here, respectfully in opposition to House Bill 726 on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties. You do have my written testimony, but I'd like to make a few points. House Bill 726 comes with a $30 million fiscal note for local governments, and that's at least $30 million, stripping away critical county revenues that fund schools, emergency services, public health, and infrastructure. The bill fundamentally rewrites the intent of the homestead property tax credit, which was designed to protect primary homeowners from rising property tax burdens, not to hand out tax breaks for second homes, investment properties, or vacation rentals. Nearly every county, as the sponsor mentioned, has already gone beyond the state mandated cap to provide even greater relief to homeowners, but this bill undermines those efforts and forces counties to reconsider or roll back those voluntary expansions. I also want to note that any increase in assessed value is phased in over 3 years. So Maryland also tries to ease the burden when that happens in that instance as well. So at a time when counties are already facing significant state cost shifts, education funding mandates, restricted revenue options, this bill would drain local budgets and force difficult decisions, either higher taxes or cuts to essential services, neither of which counties want to do. So with that, MAKO urges an unfavorable report to protect local tax bases, ensure tax relief remains targeted to primary homeowners, and prevent a costly and unfunded state mandate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 726. Delegate Weibel, Washington County, House Bill 750.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Wilkins, and honorable members of the committee. Again, I'm Delegate Weibel, pleased to present House Bill 750, Washington County Property Tax Credit, Economic Development Properties, which alters the eligibility requirements of the property tax credit for businesses that make investments in real property in Washington County. This is a local bill, a little less complex than the last one, which makes changes to existing economic development incentives by differentiating between new and existing businesses, the number of additional individuals employed, and amounts invested. The proposed changes seek to strengthen economic incentives, attract the desired businesses, and develop higher quality employment opportunities while stabilizing the county's employment tax base. The changes are requested by unanimous vote of the Washington County Board of County Commissioners, as well as the county economic development personnel. The legislation has unanimous support of the Washington County legislation delegation. You have a letter of support from the Washington County Board of County Commissioners and Jonathan Horowitz, Washington County's Director of Business and Economic Development, and I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 750. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on House Bill 750. Delegate Long, House Bill 67.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and esteemed members. For the record, I'm Delegate Bob Long. I want to thank you in advance. These bills were supposed to have been heard previously, but unfortunately, circumstances changed that because I got COVID. Still like to know who I got it from because I like to give them something back. It's taking its toll on me. Not nothing. Anyway, this bill has to do with election law, absentee ballot, signature requirement verification. A lot of these bills I'm going to be talking about is because I believe the state of Maryland needs to be number one in transparency, verification, and just the overall integrity of our election system. Give you a little scenario. When I first ran for office back in 2010, didn't have an idea what I was doing. Had actually was going to run for Congress because a certain person did not show up for my luncheon meeting, and I'm not going to say his name was Delegate Rick Metzger. I decided that I was going to run for House of Delegates. I'm thinking, well, what the heck? Anyway, make a long story short, I ran a 90-day campaign, ran it out of my pocket, came within 500 votes of winning, not knowing what I was doing. That being said, the night that I went to bed, it was put on the wire that I had won. AP had predicted that I had won. I went to bed, I guess, around 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was still a winner. The next morning, I woke up, and I lost. One precinct took me out, 500 votes. And I was determined then that I was going to do everything I could to make sure that, my voice and the people in my district's voice would be heard. Anyway, signature verification. I know we have the means and the facilities to be able to verify signatures, and I think it would only be prudent to do that to make sure that people are aware that we're doing the best job we possibly can with our election laws. Just recently, we had an instance where the comptroller had mailed out, I think it was 1099s, and there was a mix-up on Social Security numbers and all that. It was not good. Over 6,000 pieces of mail went out. Things happen. So we should be prepared to be able to take and overcome anything like it could possibly happen, especially with absentee ballots. I've heard story after story that people's got ballots that they didn't order. And I can't deny it or I can't prove it, but just the thought of, not knowing whether your vote counts makes a difference. And that's why I brought this bill forward. I know Maryland needs to be number one. We're number one on a lot of different things, and I think voter integrity should be number one. We want to make sure voter integrity is not only transparent, but it cannot be, messed with and verifiable. And that way, when we wake up in the morning, like I did, we can kind of feel like, everything was on the up and up. I'll be honest with you, I still think there was some fiddling done with one of the cards. That was back before we had paper ballots. So that is a summary of why I really do believe we need signature verification on absentee ballots.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 67, Delegate Long, House Bill 91.
You have to bear with me, Madam Chair. I think we have 20 bills here. In-person voting proof of identification. This is only common sense. I'm sorry, for the record again, Delegate Bob Long, HB 91. This is only common sense that we can implement to be able to make sure that our elections are fraud-free and are the most unique, well, the most transparent, and let's set a role model for different areas. A recent Gallup poll that was conducted in October of 2024 showed that 84% of Americans supported voter ID vote. everyone that I've spoke to said it's a good idea because things happen. It's good business. I mean, we talked yesterday in very detailed about making sure that people that were gambling online, that their ID was valid and it wasn't fraudulent. And I think our voting should not be not treated any less. If anything, it should be treated to a higher standard. And that's why I brought this forth. Thank you, Madam Chairman. We would ask for a favorable vote.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 91. Delegate Long, House Bill 115.
For the record, Delegate Bob Long here for HB 115. Election law, polling places, establishment of Voter Identification Privacy Act of 2025. Reason we're asking this, we hope that we could pass voter ID. If not, I think the least we need to do is pass this law that where if you go to a voting place and you have to identify yourself, instead of you verbally doing that, you can hand them your ID. I mean, it's scary, especially in today's technology, what people can do with a little bit of information they can glean. So you have to verbally give them your name, your address, and whatever they require. And every time I go to vote, there's at least 15 or 20 people there. I'll be honest with you, I feel uncomfortable. I mean, I'm very cautious about who I give my information out to. People can use it against you. I mean, we've got people out here, it's opening accounts in your names. It's just, the technology is just unreal. So that's why we asked for this. We would like to have voter ID, would be great. And let's be a leader. Maryland's a leader, and I think this is something we need to get ahead of and be a leader in it. I want to thank you for this opportunity to give this presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Long? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 115. House Bill 285, Delegate Long.
Madam Chair, you did say 281, right? 385, okay.
285.
All right. Like I said, I've got a ton of bills here.
The only ones you have left here are 285 and 562.
Okay.
So whichever one you want to do first is fine.
285?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. And for the record, again, Delegate Bob Long, HB 285. Election law, voter registration list, and absentee ballots for voter ballots. The last election, now that we are starting to see more absentee ballots, it's harder for us to get, pardon me, it's harder for us to be able to get the information, people that are voting absentee ballot. And now with the way the mail is, by the time you get this list and you decide you want to reach out to this voter, because we should be able to reach out to voters, especially in our district, it might be too late. So we want to make sure that this is processed and expedited. Pardon me. That this is expedited and processed in a timely manner so we can reach out to our constituents. We want our constituents and people that's voting to have knowledge of what our platforms are and what we stand for, and let them make the difference whether they want to vote for, let them make the decision whether they want to vote for us or not. And again, I want to thank you for this opportunity to present HB 285.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay. Your last one, Delegate Long, House Bill 562.
What's this trifecta? Good afternoon, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm here to testify on HB 562, which is a bill that would change a number of, well, let me go back. Recently, the county council had put forth legislation to change the county council from 7 members to 9. After that was passed, all the different central committees looked at what they needed to do to be able to provide members for each local precinct. Actually, this is going to be a Baltimore County delegation bill, and I think that the Democrats have also seen that they need to change the way that their bylaws are done, and that's what this is all about. We just want to change the way the Baltimore County Central Committee has a number of people for each councilmanic district. Right now, we have 4, it'll be going down to 3.
So thank you for the presentation, and you have a lot of people that have questions for you. Look at, so where should we start?
I don't care.
We're just joking. Every single light is lit up. We're just joking.
I didn't even notice.
I didn't even know.
I'm lit up.
His light's even on.
And I believe this is one of the bills we can have some fun on, because this is one of the things the Democrats and the Republicans realize we have to make a difference. And every once in a while, we can kind of overcome that difference. And I want to thank our chair for setting this straight and trying to keep us in the right direction.
Thank you, Delegate Long.
Thank you.
All right, everybody give it up for Delegate Long Day. All right, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 562. House Bill 570, Talbot County, Delegate Hutchinson.
Good afternoon. So good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm Delegate Tom Hutchinson from beautiful Eastern Shore. I'm here as the chair of the Talbot County delegation to present House Bill 570, Talbot County Hotel Rental Tax Time Penalty for Non-Payment. While I know there's no such thing as an easy bill, I think this comes just about as close as possible. Currently, there are 24 state jurisdictions that collect hotel rental taxes. Of the 24 jurisdictions, 21 counties and the city of Baltimore require that the tax be collected within 30 days of the due date. After 30 days, a 10% penalty of unpaid tax may be imposed. There are only 2 counties, Talbot and Wacomico County, that have a 120-day window to remit the tax before a penalty can be applied. Talbot County respectfully asks to change the 120-day period to 30 days to be consistent with the other jurisdictions. This will improve the cash flow, streamline their collection process of their hotel taxes. I thank you, and I ask for your support of House Bill 570.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 570. House Bill 740 is being presented by Delegate Kaiser's intern or staff person, Christopher Cisse, who I believe is on Zoom. He's not there? Okay, well, we will circle back to that. Okay, calling House Bill 585, Delegate Polakovich Carr. And you have one witness here and one virtually.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. For the record, I'm Delegate Julie Blockage-Carr, here to present House Bill 585. Colleagues, we all know that there is an affordable housing crisis in our state. The official estimates put the deficit at least 85,000 affordable housing units that we lack right now. That is a number that is growing and projected to grow year by year. So I think we need to be looking thoroughly and creatively at what we can do to streamline more affordable housing coming online and being built in our state. And as you're going to hear today from the witnesses signed up on this bill, some affordable housing developers in our state have run into some issues as the new properties that they have built are coming online and first being assessed for property tax purposes by SDAT, our State Department of Assessment and Taxation. The bill before you really just seeks to solve these problems, to streamline this process. I will note that we have a late-breaking amendment that we are hopefully going to come to a compromise soon on between SDAT, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and the affordable housing developers. But I'll turn it over to the witnesses to talk more about what the problem is.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My Vice Chair Tom Cole on behalf of the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition. This is one of two priority bills for Make this session. This is a technical bill, but it is a very big issue as it relates to our members. When low-income housing tax credit projects, which are the primary means of providing affordable housing across the country, are assessed by SDAT, there is a standard operating procedure of how you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to do it based off of net operating income with some consideration for the affordability covenants that are on the property. That's an agreement between MAKE, our members, and SDAT, but nevertheless, we have many instances that you may hear from one of our members who is online where that assessment is not done in the way that SDAT knows that it should be done, and our members are forced to appeal the assessment. In many circumstances, they're forced to prepay the assessment while the appeal is pending and then seek a reimbursement once the correct assessment is done. So this bill codifies what that practice is supposed to be, what SDAT acknowledges it's supposed to be, and makes it so that our members should not have to appeal going forward and instead can have the assessment done in accordance with the generally accepted practices. As the sponsor mentioned, we do have an amendment that DHCD is working on with SDAT that would essentially take out the language that exists in the bill as proposed and instead improve the communications between DHCD and SDAT. Once LIHTC credits were awarded, DHCD would notify SDAT that such credits have been awarded. We think there is promise in this amendment. We certainly want to work with compromise, but obviously considering the scale of the problem that our members are dealing with, we want to ensure that we don't have to revisit this problem in future sessions. So we would ask for a favorable report on House Bill 585. Thank you.
Okay, do we have Patrick Stewart or Jessica Zuniga virtually?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Stewart, hello. You're on for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. So I'll try to keep it brief. My name is Patrick Stewart. I'm a Regional Vice President with Penrose, speaking on behalf of House Bill 585. Tom, thanks for your remarks. Real quick, as far as an introduction, Penrose is we're a multifamily developer and manager. We have a mission-driven focus on affordable housing. We've been active in Maryland for about 25 years and currently have about 20 plus properties under operations, and which represents about 1,800 units. Most of that is affordable housing under the Section 42 LIHTC program. I want to talk a little bit about sort of the bigger picture impetus for this bill and like the context. So generally speaking, it's really, really challenging to sustain the financial operations of affordable housing communities. In other words, income restricted housing under Section 42, the low income housing tax credit program. Since COVID, with historic inflation touching all aspects of our work, every category of operating expenses has increased while rent increases are obviously capped given the income restricted nature. This significantly strains the long-term financial health of these communities. Property managers, property owners do everything humanly possible to control expenses, but certain expense categories, namely utilities, insurance, and property taxes, are out of our control. So it's really about being able to predict and have some predictability with those, in particular property taxes. For properties that don't benefit from a tax abatement or other property tax reduction, it's really critical to be able to predict and reliably budget for the property's annual tax bill. And too often there are significant discrepancies between the actual value of the property, accounting for the long-term income restrictions which run with the land, versus the assessed value, which in turn obviously informs the property tax bill. So oftentimes the assessment process does take into account the income restrictions, but in our experience, as an industry, it often varies depending on the jurisdiction and the assessor. I'm sorry, I'm out of time. Can I keep going, or?
Can you wrap up, please?
Okay, sure. So it's, as Tom sort of alluded to, it's unfortunately very common for a property to have to spend large amounts of money appealing assessments that were done using a sales comp approach, for example, a process that the appeal process often takes over a year or longer and diverts scarce resources away from where they're needed, which is providing residents services, paying mortgages, keeping lights on, paying staff, et cetera. And we have affordable housing providers who have lost literally hundreds of thousands of dollars due to these issues. So we feel strongly this is a pressing issue that requires a legislative fix, and we deeply appreciate the attention that the committee is devoting to it. So sorry for going over. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, and don't go anywhere. We have questions. Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to understand it better. I think that was a pretty good explanation. So the gentleman online or the folks with the association, it just seems what's happening is some assessors are assessing these properties as if they were non-capped. Hey, gee, if I went and sold that tomorrow and you didn't have all the lower income restrictions and the variability of that, you could get $20 million from it. But what you're saying is, look, we're capped at what our operating income is. And when you did that analysis as opposed to a comparable sale analysis, we're really not worth that much. Our property taxes is way higher than what we can afford to pay and keep our low-income housing mission and therefore qualify for our tax credits that financed our project, yada, yada. Is that basically it in a nutshell?
That's 100% correct, and actually, we normally get there after there's an appeal, but it really is not an efficient use of government resources or the resources of our members to have to hire an attorney, appeal the assessment, just to get to the place that we all know we should be beginning.
I mean, I love hiring more attorneys. That's good for the profession. It's good for my colleagues out there, but I understand what you're saying. And basically, Delegate Plakowicz-Carr, you're saying that SDAT is acknowledging, like, hey, we should clarify this and make it more uniform so that it's very evident for the property owner to say, I need to see your worksheet, essentially. Show me your work of how you did this. And if you do it in a different way, I can wave the law around, and it's just very black and white.
So SDAT actually has very clear procedures already written in their manual, and I'll say the bill as introduced would codify those existing procedures in their manual. What we're trying to work out with the amendment with them, and I should give credit, SDAT, I believe, has already sent some information to all of their county assessors to flag this issue and to encourage them to comply with that, right, with that manual. But the new amendment that we'll likely be offering to the committee is looking to streamline another piece of the, I'd say, of the process involving DHCD and basically when LIHTC, I'm using a lot of acronyms here, when LIHTC properties are getting those approvals, just so SDAT can start their work a little bit earlier. So I'm anticipating that probably everything that's in this bill before you right now is going to get struck with the amendment.
Okay, well, thanks. It's an interesting issue. I appreciate it.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Delegate Long. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for bringing this bill forward. I just want to clarify what I'm understanding. You're saying that SDAT has standards that they have to apply, and they have regulations that they're supposed to adhere to. Am I correct?
So these are not regulations. These are internal procedural manuals that they understand that this is how the projects are to be assessed. The problem is that there is a gap between performance and the procedure manual that we had requested this bill to address.
Right, and you're saying you're spending a lot of money in attorney's fees for assessed value to be able to appeal assessed values, correct?
That's correct.
And most of the time you're saying that you found that SDAT is not staying within their parameters?
That they are, based off of the discrepancy amongst individual assessors, they are in many circumstances, doing it the right way, but in those circumstances where they're not, it's in the procedural manuals, and on appeal, they correct it, but we have to go through an appeal to get them to do it correctly.
Right, and just to give you a little bit of information, the reason I was asking these questions, we have the same problem in Baltimore County. We feel that they've went outside their parameters of what their normal procedures are. And as appraisers, they should have a standard of appraisal, let me think how to say this. As assessors, they should be able to use standard assessment of appraisals to be able to assess a piece of property. Unfortunately, they're not. That's the reason you're here today. And I'm interested. I would love to see how this works out, because I'll be honest with you, in my district, people are standing on the ledge with their property taxes. You know, I've had several calls where they can't afford to pay they pay their property taxes, their insurance, or their mortgage. And that's not what we're supposed to be about. We're supposed to be able to help homeowners to be able to maintain their house. And I understand where you guys are coming from. You have criteria that you have to meet too. Anyway, I would love to have further conversations about this, and let's try to get this fixed for everybody.
Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 585. Delegate Jones, House Bill 598.
Hello, Ways and Means family. I'm so happy to see all of you. For the record, I'm Delegate Dana Jones, representing District 30A in the House of Delegates, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the committee. I come before you to introduce HB 598, Anne Arundel County Property Tax Credit Supermarkets. House Bill 598 is enabling legislation that would authorize the governing body of Anne Arundel County or a municipal corporation in Anne Arundel County to grant a property tax credit against the personal property tax imposed on supermarkets that completes certain construction and is located in certain food desert retail incentive areas. It would require the governing body to designate what constitutes a food desert retail incentive area for purposes of the tax credit. According to the county's 2022 Poverty Amongst Plenty report, there are 17 census tracts in Anne Arundel County with nearly 75,000 residents that have received the food desert designation. This includes areas of Eastport, Glen Burnie, Brooklyn Park, Linthicum Heights, Fort Meade, Jessup, and Severn. I'm proud to cross-file this bipartisan legislation with Senator Simon Eyre and hope that this tax credit can serve as a tool in the county's toolbox to attract investment where it's critically needed. You should have received a letter from our delegation secretary in support, as this is past delegation. And with that, I respectfully urge a delegation vote to move favorably on 598.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 598. Delegate Jones, House Bill 586. And let's see if, well, we do have one individual here with us, and then a couple supposed to be virtual, so.
Great. For the record, I'm Delegate Dana Jones, representing District 30A in the House of Delegates. Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the Ways and Means Committee, I am here to introduce HB 586, Election Law, Election Judges Compensation. First, this bill addresses an ongoing problem that local boards of elections have been experiencing regarding no-show judges. Currently, judges are paid at least $50 for each course of instruction to serve as an election judge. The payment is irrespective of their actual future service as an election judge. At present, there have been absolutely significant occurrences around the state of prospective judges taking part and being paid for the training, but then failing to fulfill their duty as an election judge. We are still finalizing a complete scope of the impact to the state with the State Board of Election, but based on data collected so far, this issue is costing LBEs tens of thousands of dollars per cycle. And as soon as we have the rest of that data completed, I will be sharing it with the committee. So what does the bill do? One, it adjusts the timing of training payment so that judges are only paid for training after completing their service as an election judge. This adjustment ensures that judges are correctly paid for their time training, but only after they fulfill their commitment as an election judge. Second, we want to encourage our youth to participate in civic engagement. To do this, the bill will also allow public school students to earn service learning hours towards graduation, while also receiving compensation for their work. This incentivizes our youth citizens to foster a deeper sense of civic responsibility and introduces them to the significance of this critical work. Serving as election judge and participating in the election process provides judges with firsthand experience of how our system really works. This public service is truly unique compared to other options to fulfill the SSL requirements and hours. Our local boards, as you know, through a lot of testimony, several other bills, and all the work you do here on election law, our local boards are struggling to recruit enough election officials. So it's vital we recognize that students not only can do this for their civil service, but also as an election judge, they can be compensated for their time. With that, I respectfully urge the committee to move favorable on HB 586.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Jones? Okay, Mr. Lang, I'll ask you to come up and testify for 2 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, fellow members, my name is Alan Lang from Harwood, Maryland, and I'm here to support the bill. I'll skip the part about not having any data about how bad the situation was, because you already addressed that. And so I had vague recollections as an election judge that I didn't get paid until after I had served, but maybe either things have changed or my memory is a little faulty since I haven't been a judge for 5 years. But going on to the other part of the bill, I wholeheartedly support any student serving as a judge to receive both financial and service learning credits as compensation for their service. When I served as a judge, many of us were retired or nearing retirement age, and long day, especially when serving all those consecutive days as an early voting judge, was draining. This bill would encourage more youthful judges to assist us and would also help us get through the days by feeding off their energy and enthusiasm. So please enter a favorable report for this bill.
Okay, do we have Mr. Canali with us virtually, or Aaron Peroni? Okay, Mr. Canali, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kevin Canali here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in support of the bill. You do have my written testimony, but I would like to make just a few points. MACO supports House Bill 586 because it strengthens accountability and it ensures taxpayer dollars are used responsibly. As the sponsor mentioned, current law requires counties to pay election judges for completing training, even if they fail to show up on election day. This is a wasteful mandate, and it forces local election boards to spend limited funds on individuals who do not fill their responsibilities and creates unnecessary staffing gaps and operational challenges. This bill corrects that situation by ensuring training compensation is only provided to election judges who actually serve. The second part of the bill modernizes student participation by allowing those earning service learning credits to also receive election judges' pay, and we think that that will make it easier to recruit and retain reliable judges in the future. So this is a practical, common sense fix that promotes fairness, efficiency, and a stronger election process, and MACO urges a favorable report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Peroni, please, for 2 minutes.
Yep. Hello, good afternoon. Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and committee members. I'm going to sound like a broken record because I'm basically going to repeat what everybody else has said. My name is Erin Perone. I am the president of the Maryland Association of Election Officials, which we all know as MAO. I'm also the election director in Carroll County. And first, I would like to thank Delegate Jones for sponsoring this bill. Mayo supports House Bill 586. This bill ensures that election judge training compensation is only provided to individuals who actually serve during early voting or on election day. Under current law, as you know, local election office, we must pay individuals who complete training even if they don't serve. With the data that Mayo has gathered so far, in the 2024 presidential general election, approximately $79,320 was paid to individuals for their training pay, but did not serve as an election judge. And at a time when both state and local budgets are are under significant strain, eliminating this unnecessary expense will provide much needed financial relief. Also, this bill clarifies that public school students can earn their required service learning hours while receiving the same compensation as other election judges. In some jurisdictions, students were previously unable to earn service hours if they were paid. Since election judges have to be paid by law, this bill would this restriction would prevent students from serving as election judges while also fulfilling their graduation requirements. So House Bill 586 removes this barrier, allowing our young folks to serve as an election judge, get that payment, and then also earn service learning credits. On behalf of the Maryland Association of Election Officials, I respectfully urge a favorable report on House Bill 586, and thank you for your time today.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on House Bill 586. Delegate Morgan, can we start with 7:30 while I wait? There's supposed to be some joint folks coming down from E&T to hear your other bill.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I believe on 7:30, also have a witness that's signed up
Yeah, let me,
virtually. So,
yes, we'll see if Ron Barnes is there. And then also Camille Fesh was signed up. She's not here, but we'll see if these folks are here virtually.
awesome, great. Well, so good to see Ways and Means Committee, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. My pleasure to present to you House Bill 730. This is a bill you haven't heard before, so it's a little bit something new, because the next bill I'm going to do, you've heard many times. This bill, if you were here in the 2018 session, you might remember that we had a bill on the House floor dealing with online advertising and social media. And you had to put yourself in the right frame of mind back then. This was right after President Trump won, beat Hillary Clinton, and there was a lot of information and news coming out about the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where they were actually sending out Facebook ads and using that to data mine for users. So there was a huge push, and in the backdrop of that and the Russian disinformation, Maryland was like the first state in the nation, I believe, to pass some type of digital transparency requirement on anyone that advertised or campaigned on social media and digitally. The way the law was written, Google, who's the premier company as far as like online advertising, just really couldn't implement those advertising requirements at all. So they said, well, you know what, we're not gonna advertise at all. If you're campaigning on like some type of Google ad in Maryland, we're not gonna allow it. Well, that didn't work out for some big news advertisers, such as the Baltimore Sun, the Washington Post. So they filed suit. And if you look at the fiscal note, towards the back of the fiscal note, it talks about that. It talks about the court case, U.S. District Court of Maryland, Washington Post versus David McManus. And the court system found that the law that we pushed through is most likely unconstitutional. And they drew the large advertisers out of the bill. So now you have a situation where the news media can advertise, but if you're some small candidate for like the school board or even the House of Delegates, if you're Dorothy Andrews in St. Mary's County and you want to run some digital advertising, well, you can't. But larger campaigns can kind of get away with it. So the aim of the bill is to provide some type of balance to this and really fix it. And as I said earlier in my testimony, Maryland got really ahead of this before the rest of the country did. And I think online advertisers like Facebook, Google, Twitter, them have gotten a better grasp on the transparency part of it, displaying who is actually paying for these ads and where they're going. And so I would ask for a favorable report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I'm sure Ron Barnes here could probably give you some more information on it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Barnes, for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and thank you, Delegate Morgan, for bringing the bill. I want to echo comments about this enabling Google to re-enter the market for political advertising in the state as we address some of the technical issues in the law and adapt them to meet the needs of the online advertising ecosystem. Google does indeed have a transparency report, and for several years now have required political advertisers to provide information that we can include in this transparency report. Delegate Morgan's bill, House Bill 730, recognizes the difference between the online and offline advertising ecosystems and allows for the appropriate changes so that online transparency can be done, and that at least in our case, from Google's case, we will be able to re-enter the market. One of the key features is placing the responsibility on advertisers to provide notice to the platform, and then the transparency occurs after the ads have run. I've spoken with Mr. Demarinis at the Board of Elections and committed to him and to Delegate Morgan to address any issues that might arise as this bill moves, and would ask for your favorable consideration for it. And I'm pleased here to be able to support it today. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Barnes. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 730. So now we will go to Delegate Morgan, House Bill 695. And we have with us from ENT, this is a jointly assigned bill, Delegates Morgan and Tarasa and Jacobs. Welcome. If you have a question, just hop up to an empty seat and I will acknowledge you. All right, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ways and Means Committee, this is House Bill 695, repairing the Transportation Trust Fund Act of 2025. This is a bill that you did hear somewhat last year. We have problems in the Transportation Trust Fund. Back in 2013, Transportation Trust Fund was not in good shape at all. And that was back before most of us were even in the legislature. And there was a decision made to tie or to increase the gas tax and to tie the gas tax to consumer price index, to inflation. And it was really sold to the public as a way to permanently fix the Transportation Trust Fund. Well, here it is 12 years later, and the Transportation Trust Fund is broke once again. So we're looking for a more permanent fix for that. And to do that, well, we just get back to some historical practices. So this bill does about 2 or 3 different things here. First, it gets rid of the gas tax. It forces like elected officials to vote on it when they want to raise it. Because the theory of we're going to have this perpetual influx of money and it's going to go for the intended use, well, that's just not happening. Second, there was a commission set up by the General Assembly called the Train Commission. And they were looking at how to fund mass transit. And the first thing they came up with was a per mileage tax, which may sound good for those who ride mass transit, but for those that drive, well, that's not really well. Plus, not to mention, last year, we did put I believe, some type of transfer tax on EVs. So there's really no need for a mileage tax, and this bill would get rid of that. But third, and what most importantly it does, over the next 5 years, it phases in and restructures the Transportation Trust Fund, returning Fairfax recovery back to its historical value. So the historical value of Fairfax recovery, I should have put this in a bill folder so you all can see it really nice and big. This is a chart, you know well, Delegate, that deals with how much money and the money being spent out of the Transportation Trust Fund. And if you go back and look back in like 2007, 51% of the money in the Transportation Trust Fund would go to roads and bridges. Well, this year, in this year's budget, only 22% goes to roads and bridges. So we'd like to bring some fairness back to the Transportation Trust Fund. And what this does is phase it in over the next 5 years, returning it back to historical value of Fairfax recovery to 35%. I'd have you look at the fiscal note, which does a really good job of showing how much subsidies are going into mass transit. On page 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth paragraph, the paragraph that starts with chapter 16 and 24. If you read the last sentence on there, as shown in MTA's most recent report in fiscal year 2023, Fairbox recovery rates for MTA, bus, light rail, heavy rail, and commuter rail operating costs were 7%, 4%, 6%, and 4.9% respectively. At some point, motorists, it's just not fair for them to be subsidizing other people's modes, the transportation to work, when they're getting the shaft. And you look at through SHA and MTA's budget, there's projects in every one of our districts here that are being cut down locally. The big project in St. Mary's that are being cut is Route 5 and Great Mills Road. And it's because so much money is currently being transferred over to mass transit. And there has to be some equity in that going forward. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, are there any questions from the committee? Delegate Buckle.
Madam Chair, and Delegate, thank you. You know, some of the opposition suggests that, well, we have to be opposed to this because we won't be getting these future revenues through the automatic CPI inflation index for the gas tags. But as I read the bill, you're not suggesting that, you know, we can't ever raise the gas tax. You're just saying it doesn't raise automatically, that it has to come back legislation through the department, through a member of the legislature. Somebody has to come back and say, hey, we want to raise the gas tax by X amount. It just doesn't happen automatically. So some of the opposition to it of, oh, you know, woe is me, we won't have money for the TTF because we don't have the taxes. Your bill doesn't determine what the rate will be in the future. It just says that we have to deal with it as a legislature.
Right. It's something wrong about just a tax that's on autopilot. This goes up, and then that tax is not used for an intended purpose. So we had a little debate about that on the floor this morning over special assessment fees, that special assessment fees are supposed to be used for an intended purpose. And when they're not, well, that's a real problem. I will say that some of the opposition is concerned about this. I don't recall their opposition because Fairfax recovery rates of mass transit used to also be connected to CPI.
Right. I was looking at that.
And the General Assembly removed that.
Right. I looked in the fiscal note, just looking at that paragraph you've noted.
So it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to remove it from one and
so
not
that's
the
what,
other.
Right. So the MTA that runs a lot of our mass transit, not WMATA, but our Maryland specific, may not fix or revise any fare or rate charge the general public until the public hearing is held. So if you want to come in and say you have to pay $5 instead of $4 to ride an MTA mass transit vehicle, you have to have a public hearing on that where everybody comes in and they vote on it. But if we want to raise the gas tax, it just happens automatically.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I remember it was only about a year ago The governor also agreed with that position too. Look at the Maryland Matters letter. Governor Westmore wants the legislature to address Maryland's automatic gas tax. We've got to do better for working families. So look, this has been a bipartisan issue that, you know, taxes are collected for the best possible reasons, and then sometimes they're misused or not going to its intended purposes. And having a simple public hearing, maybe a bill and focus grouping that with elected officials in public, it's not a bad thing.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you to the folks that joined us from E&T. Thank you. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 695. Delegate Ruth, House Bill 642.
Madam Chair, may I pass some paper petitions around? I called and asked. Thank you, thank you. Everyone can have one of these, and I just want to pass this around. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Delegate Sheila Ruth, and I'm here presenting House Bill 642. Currently sending around some, this has to do with ballot petitions, which are used to put a candidate or a question or a party on the ballot. The reason that I'm sending around these paper petitions is a part of this has to do with electronic petitions and enabling electronic signatures. I think some of the members of this committee may have never seen a ballot petition and may not really realize the difficulties associated with them. So you should have a blank one that you can keep. I'm also sending around several written ones that you can look at just to kind of see the problems that happen. I do want those back because they have people's personal information on them, and I promised I would safeguard those. So I'm going to go off script for a minute, Madam Chair, and tell a story. I'm going to tell a story of a group of dedicated activists from Baltimore County who had a simple idea that the Baltimore County Council should expand to represent people, to represent the expansion in the county population, because the county population had grown so much since the county was formed that we needed more county council members in order to represent people adequately. These are grassroots activists. Some were central committee members. A few elected officials like myself got on board early. But in general, these were just grassroots people who believed in this cause and wanted to get this question on the ballot for people to vote for. Many of the people supporting this petition are seniors. And so for 2.5 years, these dedicated activists were out every week at fairs, festivals, farmers markets, libraries, shopping centers, in the heat, in the rain, in the snow, collecting signatures. They eventually got over 10,000 signatures, and last summer they turned in 10,242 signatures, which is just above the 10,000 required. Now, the Maryland Board of Elections recommends that for petitions, you turn in 15,000 for the 10,000 required, because that many petitions get invalidated. And that indeed was the case here. Out of the 10,242 signatures submitted, 2,958 were rejected. Those are voters who wanted to exercise their right to put a question on the ballot and signed. And they were rejected for various reasons. The name standard is the most common reason that they were rejected. 1,195 people were rejected for name standard. So, for example, I have one here. Somebody wrote, it looks like their full name, first name, middle name, and last name, and yet on the side here, the codes are on the side, it says NS, name standard, so it was rejected. I don't know why it was rejected, but something about that name they didn't like. The rules are very specific about names, how names have to be. They either have to match your voter registration, which you may have registered decades ago and not remembered how you put your name in your registration, or they have to be one full name, your full surname, and middle initials of every other name. So imagine now that you're standing at Walmart in 95-degree heat outside of Walmart trying to collect signatures. You have maybe 10 seconds to get people's attention and to convince them to sign the petition. And then, even if they do agree, they have to fill in all this information specifically the way it's required. They have to either look up their name on their voter registration on their phone standing outside of Walmart or follow very specific name rules. For women have a particular problem because women change our names sometimes throughout our lives. As we get married, we may, not always, but we may change our name to our married name. Sometimes we get divorced, sometimes we get married again, and you may not even remember which name you have in your voter registration, and you're standing there at Walmart trying to remember that. So these paper petitions are a problem. Another group of people that these are a problem for are disabled people. And the National Federation of the Blind has a letter in your bill folder supporting this. As you look at this petition, imagine being blind and trying to fill out this petition. Really, this is discriminatory. You can't fill this out without help if you can't see it. So this bill would do several things. First of all, it would allow electronic signatures. So in other words, somebody could go on a computer and sign on a computer. It also would relax the name standards. So as long as the Board of Elections can reasonably verify that you are who you say you are, even if it doesn't match the very strict rules which are set in law and in COMAR, that it would relax that and allow them to verify. So if you're Nicholas Ruth, or you're John Nicholas Ruth, which is my husband's name, and you sign Nick Ruth, or even if you sign John Ruth but don't put Nicholas, if they can verify it's you, that they would allow that. This bill would also allow for a period of time for voters to be able to correct mistakes that they made in their petition. So just to wrap this up, there's some belief that this bill is about trying to make it easier for petitioners to gather signatures. This is not about making it easier to get signatures. This is about fixing a process that is deeply flawed and deeply broken and causes pain for everyone involved. Whether you are a voter who wants to sign a petition, particularly a disabled voter who can't sign it, or other categories, whether you are trying to collect signatures, whether you are the Board of Elections who has to look at every single one of these signatures and verify them. And this puts significant burden on the local Board of Elections. Just ask the Baltimore County Elections Administrator about what they had to go through for this particular petition. Allowing electronic signatures was done during the pandemic. The Board of Elections allowed it during the pandemic when people couldn't get out and collect signatures in person. And what was submitted to the Board of Elections had a very, very low error rate, because the software that was used for people to fill out these signatures actually looked up your information on the Board of Elections as a part of that. So it would not only help people to sign petitions, it would help our local Board of Elections and potentially save a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of stress during election season when they are already overburdened. Finally, I just want to address the elephant in the room, which is the David Smiths and the Robin Fickers. And I know there are concerns about some things that have been put on the ballot. And there's concerns that this would make it easier for them. They already have the capability. They have the money to hire paid canvassers. So they're not hurt at all by the fact that they can't collect electronic signatures. They have paid canvassers. They often turn in well more signatures than are needed to get something on the ballot. What this would do is it would help everyone else involved, including true grassroots petitioners and as well. And so I guess with that, I'll wrap up, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I have a question. Thank
Yes.
you. So could you explain to me, because I don't know, how it would work? If you're collecting electronic signatures, is somebody standing out there with, their phone or a tablet, and then they just ask somebody, do you want to sign this petition for X, Y, and Z purpose? And then what happens? They put in a name, they search them in the database. Can you just kind of tell me what happens?
Yes, thank you for the question, Madam Chair. And the bill is not, the bill is silent on how this has to be implemented. It directs the Board of Elections to develop regulations and develop process for how it would be implemented. During the pandemic, the Board of Elections relied on third parties to collect the signatures. So if you were a petitioner, you had a piece of software that people could enter their name and their birth date and their address, and it would check it against the publicly available voter registration data, which they were able to purchase from the Board of Elections. And if it didn't match, the voter was given an error that it didn't match, and then they could correct it and try again. If it did match, then it was added to a signature petition. Those petitions, in the case of the pandemic, were actually still printed off and submitted as paper to the Board of Elections. But they didn't have to try to read handwriting. They didn't have the high error rate that they have with the regular petitions. Now, the Board of Elections may or may not choose to implement it that way, but that's how it was done during the pandemic. I'll also add that I think if people can do this on their own at home on a computer, they may be more likely to do research and really look deeply into something. At Walmart or the farmer's market, you have 10 to 15 seconds to explain something to someone before they move on. You can't really give them a good explanation of it. And when I was doing it, I had people say, I won't sign here because I don't know anything about it, but I'm happy to look it up and sign if you want. I would give them this card that Four More had printed up that has a QR code on it, where if they wanted to look up information and then sign, but because they couldn't sign online, they would then have to do something else in order to be able to sign. And so, and I doubt that many people I gave these cards to actually followed up by coming back and signing. Whereas if you're sitting at home, you can look it up, you can find out the full information, read the full question, and before you sign.
Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing the bill. I want to talk about a little part of it that we actually had some discussion about, I guess it was last week, about the part if a signature is invalidated, correcting technical deficiencies, including missing, partial, misspelled names, addresses, dates, by submitting a new page. I thought that part was really interesting. Would that be only available if it was an electronic position, or would this also then apply to, and if you wanted to speak any more about that, I thought that was really great.
Thank you for the question, Delegate. That would apply to anyone, even if they signed in paper the way these are, and actually probably would be more common for people who signed in paper because you would be less likely to have an error if you signed electronically. Right now, if your name is invalidated, you have no recourse, and that's it. You can't resubmit. And some of these errors are, just really tiny technical errors. A voter who wanted their name on this petition was invalidated because of a small technical error. We had some where people made really silly mistakes. They wrote the date in the name field or things like that as well. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, no, I definitely like that part. And then are any other states doing this? And my other concern is like, what would the verification process be, just to make sure everything's on the up and up? So if you know anyone else that's doing it.
Thank you for the question. I don't believe any other states are doing this now. There are several that did do it during the pandemic as we did as well. I'm sorry, what was the other part of your question?
Just about how the verification.
Oh, the verification.
Yeah, but that's fine.
So the signatures, the names on a petition are already validated. The local boards of elections look at, when these petitions are turned in, they go through and look at every individual name and verify it on the voter registration records. And so this would not change that, but it would make it less likely that they would find errors. A higher proportion of these signatures would be correct because of the way that they would be entered. And one of the other problems that we found is because these are reviewed individually by people at the local boards of elections, there's inconsistencies where one person might mark something as invalid, another person on a different page might mark the same thing as okay.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the bill.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 642. Delegate Ruth, House Bill 641, and we have with us from the wonderful Appropriations Committee, Delegates Salmon, Edelson, and Maggioni. Welcome. And if you have any questions, just hop up to an empty seat and you can ask them. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record again, I'm Delegate Sheila Ruth, and I'm here presenting House Bill 642. This bill is a potential contribution to the conversation about how we can fund our transportation. This bill allows the governor to propose a property tax specifically for transportation, and the Board of Public Works to potentially approve that. It allows classes, subclasses, and geographic boundaries, so the governor, consulting with the Secretary of Transportation, can set some specific property tax rates for different classes of property, different geographic boundaries, such as transit-oriented development or counties. There's a lot of ways that this could be done. So this does not, as I'm sure you know, all transportation projects, and I'm a transit advocate, but this is not just transit, this is transportation. This is all transportation projects. So all transportation projects are funded from the Transportation Trust Fund, and there's a project prioritization process determining which ones get funding, including the county priority letters and other mechanisms. This does not change that at all. This does not touch the project prioritization, but it does allow for some funding to come from local jurisdictions based on their needs, based on their benefits to them of transportation, and also based on equity. So this bill sets particular requirements that the governor may look at in setting these rates, including the cost to maintain existing transportation infrastructure in a state of good repair, the operating costs for transportation programs within the county, class, or geographic boundary, the transportation projects in the Consolidated Transportation Plan, the transportation priorities identified in the county priority letter, the potential disparate impact or disproportionate burden, because we don't want to inadvertently cause disparate impact or disproportionate burden with additional property taxes on people that cannot bear those additional taxes, and also allows the governor to consider potential environmental or economic benefit to the particular area or class of property as well. So it's really just a way of trying to get some skin in the game for local jurisdictions and giving them a little more ability to contribute to our Transportation Trust Fund based on their needs and their benefits as well. It also has transparency where there's required to be reported and various other guardrails as well. And it's not often that you celebrate a fiscal note, but in this case, I was very happy to see this fiscal note. It says, Transportation Trust Fund revenues may increase by a significant amount beginning in fiscal year 2027, depending on whether the Board of Public Works approves a state property tax rate for transportation projects and programs. So it goes on to say two possible scenarios. One would be all property tax on all properties, and one is only on commercial and industrial property. And the one on all properties would generate approximately $94.2 million, and the one on commercial and industrial properties would generate $17.3 million on a 1 cent property tax. That's for 1 cent property tax. Further, this would increase the bonding capability. So once you count the bonding capability, a 1 cent property tax rate on all real property taxes would increase overall Transportation Trust Fund revenues by approximately $708 million over the 4-year forecast period. This is significant money to go towards our transportation needs, and which again includes not only transit, like the Red Line in Baltimore, but it will include road projects, I-15 in Frederick, I-81 in Hagerstown, the DC Beltway, the Triple Bridges project in my own district, just to name a few. And so whether I'm grateful to the governor for finding some additional revenue for transportation, and that sort of brings us to a baseline of transportation, but we cannot afford a baseline of transportation. Transportation is essential to growth. And the governor has said our priority is growth, and without transportation, there can be no growth. And so it's really essential that we have a robustly funded transportation system. And whether this committee chooses to move this bill or any number of the other transportation bills that you're considering this session, I really hope that we can make sure that we robustly fund our transportation system to build us and supercharge us for the growth that we know that we need. Thank you so much, and I ask for a favorable report.
Okay, are there any questions for Delegate Ruth? Yep. You can go to Melissa, yeah. Delegate Wells isn't here, so. Okay, Delegate Solomon has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's nice to be with you all. Delegate Ruth, thank you for bringing the bill. Isn't it true that Northern Virginia has a similar system that they've used that allows them to fund a lot of the infrastructure and transportation investments that have kind of supercharged Northern Virginia's growth?
Yes, thank you, Delegate.
I hate comparing ourselves to Virginia, but in this instance, they've hit something. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions for Delegate Ruth? Okay, thank you, Delegate Ruth. I don't believe he's here, but Tom Ballantyne is signed up in opposition, so I'm just calling him to make, in case I don't see him, but he's not here. Okay, so that concludes the hearing on House Bill 641. Thank you to our friends from Appropriations for joining us. Thank you. Okay, Delegate Kaiser, House Bill 740, and you have Christopher Cisse with you. Welcome.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Next to me is my intern, Chris Cisse. He is a sophomore public policy major at the University of Maryland. As you all know, in my other career, I teach, and last semester, out of 100 students, I'm sitting next to the best writer out of 100 students at our flagship, so a smart young man. He will be providing the testimony. We have some infographics to hand out if I'm able to get that to a clerk or somebody else. And I'll be answering the questions, but let me tell you, he produced the question and answer document, but I'll let him get started. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Kaiser and Madam Chair. Madam Chair Atterbury and esteemed members of the Ways and Means Committee, it is my pleasure to offer testimony in favor of House Bill 740, Election Law, Campaign Materials, Disclosure of the Use of Synthetic Media. Now, many of you remember this bill is a reintroduction from last session, and I do just want to shed light on the importance of it. This bill is not about banning artificial intelligence. It's about transparency, ensuring voters know when they're viewing deceptive synthetic media and campaign materials. Now, obviously, AI is becoming an inevitable part of our daily lives, but when it's used deceptively in elections, voters have a right to know. As it stands, without this legislation, Maryland's elections remain vulnerable to widespread AI-generated deception, and we cannot afford until after a crisis occurs to do something about it. Just to avoid any confusion, I do want to provide clear definitions for both synthetic media and deepfakes. Synthetic media is any content created or altered using AI to depict events, realities, or statements that did not occur with the intent to deceive voters. Deepfakes are audio or video recordings that appear to constitute a true recording of an action, sound, vocalization, or an image, but did not occur in the manner presented in the recording. Just to add one last disclaimer, any form of low-grade Photoshop is not included within the confines of this bill and will not lead anyone under the jurisdiction of this bill to face any kind of legal action. So, why is this bill necessary? The current reality is AI manipulation is already here. Just months ago, a deepfake robocall impersonating President Biden was sent to New Hampshire voters, urging them not to vote in the primaries. AI-generated videos and images have been used to mislead voters, suppress turnout, and distort public perception, which is a decent threat to democracy. And as it stands, Maryland has no clear laws addressing synthetic media in political campaigns. Now, I just want to clarify the specific confines and jurisdictions of this bill, essentially what it does and does not do. This bill does require a simple disclosure if synthetic media is used in campaign materials. It does protect Maryland's voters, and it does align Maryland law with 21 other states that have already passed similar laws, including Texas, California, Minnesota, as well as 17 others with pending legislation. It does not infringe on any First Amendment right and does not have liability for unintended use. But we are willing to work with you all to make sure any other specific edits that the committee believes are necessary happen. It is critical to note that in this bill, mens rea is assessed based on the specific circumstances that take into account intent and who creates it. So intent, just to reiterate, one must actively have a premeditated intention to deceive. No one can or will be punished under this bill by happenstance. Without a clear, distinct, premeditated intention to deceive, you are simply not liable. This bill takes a balanced yet enforceable first step towards regulating deceptive AI use in campaign material. It does not ban AI-generated content. It simply requires campaigns to disclose when they actually use synthetic media. This allows voters to evaluate campaign materials with a better understanding of how the media was generated and how true it actually is. It is not a ban. It is just a necessary disclosure requirement. And with that, I respectfully urge this committee to issue a favorable report on House Bill 740. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Madam Vice Chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate Kaiser, and to our amazing presenter. You did an excellent job. I appreciate you bringing this bill back again because I think there is interest from this committee in figuring out the issue of deep fakes and AI and all of those issues that are before us. My question is, for those who are bad actors, who are seeking to, for the example that you gave around President Biden or anything that could happen to any of us really in a campaign, I just wonder if those bad actors who are looking to cause harm would utilize our law, noting that that disclosure is required if this was in law. So I just wanted you to react to that theory.
And thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And thank you for that question. I mean, you're right. And for a lot of our laws, does the law in place stop the bad actors? You know, the hope always is that it does, and that at the very least for the ones who are doing it, that we're at least providing more than we are now, which would be that added step of transparency. And on page 5 of the bill, I think it's on page 5, where the all the other fines and punishments are of things that go to the state board or to the state prosecutor. This is just one more of those items, and so I think there's discretion there if someone is caught doing this. But you're right. I mean, it's a fundamental question always. Do we really dissuade the bad actors? It's a fair question.
Okay, are there any other questions? I was waiting for you to light up your button. Delegate Young.
So was I.
I was reading the bill, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness in how you presented the bill and put this together. I'm probably going to have more questions when I can really digest it, and so we can chat offline, Delegate. But my question really speaks to, it talks about dissemination. Now, you talked about intent and mens rea, so that it might have already kind of touched it, but I want to know if, like, if I just repost something, and I might be part of a campaign or whatever, but if I'm reposting, that is dissemination, and maybe I'm reposting it with that intent. I mean, but how does that maybe play in? Can you respond to that?
Honestly, I'm not sure if we considered that issue, so, and yet Chris is looking through what he knows. So certainly, I can look back through our question and answers or anything else and share that with you. I mean, I think that's a great question, because that is true. We a lot of times do get an email that someone sends to us, we share on Facebook, we share to our email networks and so forth. And so how does that play in? I don't know. That's a great question.
I appreciate it, and thank you for, oh, did you have something?
Lastly, also built into the bill, if you are unknowingly sharing this information, so if for whatever reason you did not create this piece of synthetic media and your personal, so say the hypothetical was that you reposted something on social media, right? So if you're reposting that on your personal account and you were not the creator of the synthetic media, and within reason you're ignorant to the fact that it is synthetic media, you are not liable under this bill.
Which is further evidence to always hire people smarter than you. Delegate Young, I may have you just talk to Chris himself. And just to add, Madam Chair, that Chris and the rest of the office created this infographic. We did have some fact here from Public Citizen, but this is not their document. This is from the Office of Delegate Kaiser, produced by Chris and the others in the office. So I'd like to give them a shout out.
Thank you, Delegate, and thank you, Chris, for a great presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Wu.
Thank you. I think this is a great topic. One question is, under a situation, for example, a candidate just try to make fun with their own campaign materials, then it looks like not true but true. Do they need to disclose that?
We are saying no in those cases. If I want to make it look like I'm 8 feet tall and scored the final basket in the women's Olympic basketball team, I think something like that would not be needed. But I mean, I think in all cases, if any of us would be using something to exaggerate or promote ourselves in a certain case, what is the harm of, we should be putting that transparency notice in. But we're really talking about the misleading of voters, telling people not to vote, making up, not just he said, she said, but gross mischaracterizations of somebody's story.
So what a situation when they extract like half-truth kind of material, right? So it's very easy to make. You choose one sentence from a big sentence and then it's totally different from their original meaning. Is that a part of this kind of consideration?
That is not the intent of this. The half-truth, certainly we all look at different situations, scenarios with different lenses, which is exactly what I was teaching about in the ethics and morals class that Chris was in last semester. We all can look at the same scenario and see something a little differently, and that's, again, not what we're talking about here. But if it needs further definitions, and I think that's part of why I provided to the subcommittee chair and to the staff last year were further definitions from other states. So if things need to be cleaned up, but we do see that part of this is that it's supposed to be a first step, is in creating the transparency piece. I'm not sure we can solve all the other nuanced parts, but I think we have to at least, I'm a big football fan despite that game the other night being so awful, but I want to advance the ball at least the third way down the field, and I think we can do that here, is at least getting it started. But you're right, that's a fair question to ask.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for your patience. I meant to say, I was in a joint committee earlier, and if it wasn't for Delegate Hornberger, who took so long on 2 bills, I would have been here a lot sooner. I almost forgot to share that. Yes.
Did he fix his hair first before he started testifying?
I was sitting behind him.
That concludes the hearing on House Bill 740. Delegate Long, House Bill 391. And you have a couple witnesses here, one in person, one virtual, and one unfavorable.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the House Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Jeffrey E. Long Jr., presenting House Bill 391, which I have, in short, coined the Equal Representation Act. Thank you again for this opportunity to present this bill. This bill aims to bring back the power to the people when electing their Board of Education members. I want to also uplift that I in no way introduced this bill in spite of members of different political parties, but as a matter of good governance and practice. The current system of electing district members to the Board of Education, as they do at large, does not provide equal representation for all of our constituents living in Calvert or Cecil, Garrett, Montgomery, Queen Anne, St. Mary's, Somerset, Talbot, Worcester County. Instead of serving the interests of that one district, you now have board members who must appeal to the entire county, diluting the voice of individual communities. This creates a system where well-funded or widely recognized candidates have an advantage, often at the expense of hyper-local concerns. By implementing in-district voting, we can ensure that each community has a direct say in who represents them on the Board of Education. This reform strengthens local accountability, as board members will be directly answerable to the constituents in their specific district rather than the entire county. It aligns Board of Education elections with the same democratic principles that govern other district-based elections, such as those for county councils and ours in the State House. For example, I represent District 27B. Voters in District 27A or 27C are not able to elect me because we have different jurisdictions, and oftentimes in different jurisdictions, there are different communities, populations with diverse needs, backgrounds, racial backgrounds. For example, in Calvert County, there are 5 board member seats on the Board of Education in Calvert County. There are 3 that are district-wide, but then there are 2 that are at large. And so generally in Calvert County, it is 74% white, and it is 6% African-American, and then there are remaining percentages that are of other minority groups. However, there are concentrations in certain areas in Calvert County, and perhaps in other jurisdictions as well too, that tend to be siloed together or joined together frequently and more, not frequently, but rather placed together in one group. For example, in North Beach, Chesapeake Beach, you tend to have more African Americans that reside there, but their votes and their voices are diluted because of the fact that they're elected countywide and not district-wide. This change fosters greater engagement from underrepresented communities by ensuring that their voices are not overshadowed by larger, more politically active areas of the counties. A more localized approach to elections will encourage candidates who are deeply familiar with their district's unique challenges and priorities, ultimately leading to more responsive and effective governance. I also want to uplift for the record that this body in 2021 passed House Bill 651, which was more in line with the county commissioners, but it was amended to include the Board of Education, and it passed the House 95-39. And this bill is a reintroduction of that, but now focused mainly on the Board of Education. I would entertain any questions and respectfully request a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do the 2 other favorables. Mr. Lang, if you want to come up, and then we have, if Brandon Russell is here virtually. No? Okay, he's not here, so we'll have Mr. Lang testify and then do questions.
Madam Chair and fellow delegates of the committee, my name's Alan Lang from Harwood, Maryland, and I support this bill. As a resident from Anne Arundel County, we have such a system as being sought here. I believe it works very well. When I lived in Pasadena, we had someone from our county council district who better understood our schools and the educational beliefs of our area than someone who was trying to represent the entire county. This change would make the school board members from these counties have a more representative form of governing than having school board members, by having school board members who are closer to the people who elected them. This is essentially the difference between, at the national level, having someone, a congressman versus a senator. The congressman knows the district a lot better than the senator who has to represent an entire state. And I just believe it's a better form of government for the school boards. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Delegate Vogel?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate, for the bill. I guess I just want to hone in on one point that you were focusing on, which is if you're having to run countywide in a county like Montgomery County, massive county executives are running there, spending millions of dollars on these races. I mean, roughly, right? Like, what does that compare to how much a school board candidate is spending, or the capacity the school board candidate has to knock on doors all over the county?
I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question. You mean as far as how much it would cost the campaign, or?
Generally speaking, this idea that you have countywide races that are extremely expensive, very hard to get all over the county, and you have these smaller races with less money. Like, how does that present an issue to these candidates that are having to run countywide in very large counties like Montgomery County?
Okay, I think I understand. So this would not eliminate the at-large positions. Again, if the counties currently have those at-large members, this is keeping all that the same, but it's giving an opportunity for, again, those that are in a specific district, for example, District 1, 2, 3, or 4, that the entire county is not electing folks for District 1, 2, 3, or 4. If I'm running in District 1, I'm elected by the folks in District 1, District 2, District 3, likewise. I think that does give an opportunity for more of a down-the-ballot race where you tend to have younger individuals or people with limited resources or the wherewithal, a chance to really mobilize and stretch limited resources. And again, in certain jurisdictions, in certain places of the state, we do tend to see the hyper-politicization of what is supposed to be a nonpartisan office, and we see certain groups that are able to pour a lot of money into these races to sway it one way or another. And so I think that this bill would make it easier for an individual that is that grassroots candidate, that is younger, that has limited resources, to ensure that they're directly reflecting the views, the needs, and concerns of the folks in that specific district.
And one more question on the districting, right? Districts exist already. In terms of redistricting, would that be, in the future, would that be using the existing process? Sorry, maybe it's in the bill, but would that be, or maybe it's already in statute, would that be?
Yeah, nothing in that process changes, already in statute. If I'm correct, that would always abide by the same council district. So, for example, in Prince George's County, District 9 for the school board is likewise the same as District 9 for the county council. And so when the county council updates that in redistricting processes, that would then reflect for the school board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to confirm, I remember vaguely the bill from a few years ago that you mentioned. I think it was a delegate from St. Mary's County that talked about how they did their county commissioners. It didn't pass all the way through, obviously, but we considered it. I just want to make certain counties still have the ability, if they want to say, hey, we just elect people countywide. So we don't have districts. So like in my county, in Washington County, and in several other counties as noted, we don't elect people from districts. They just get elected countywide. So in the example that you gave, would your position be that if the bill passes, Calvert County Board of Education, for example, that's the example you used right now, a district representative, if they divided by districts, the only votes that counts are the votes in your district. But they could go back, Calvert County could go back and say, we want to change our system, so we elect the Board of Education. If it's 5 or 7, I'm not positive, we just elect them countywide. So is that's still legal and would still be feasible if some of these counties wanted to change from a district by district system to just say, hey, you can elect 5 people basically that live in the same block, as long as they win countywide, that would still work?
I'll say all things are lawful but not expedient. So just because I think that, yes, that would be correct and it would be true, okay. I do think that to go back and forth is counterproductive and would be confusing to the voters. And again, yes, that could be a possible feasible solution and would be justified in that respect, because again, there are jurisdictions that do allow that. But I do think that for whatever reason right now, currently, as we're, for example, mentioning Calvert or any other jurisdiction, right now, for some reason, some of these jurisdictions do like the idea of having districts, right. But for whatever reason, be it perhaps various reasons, I don't want to challenge or question anyone's intent, but for whatever reason, there seems to be some hesitation to allow the individuals in those specific districts to elect, only to be the ones to elect those who represent them, be it for a commissioner seat or a school board seat.
Right.
And so I think then to come back and change the entire formula, I think would perhaps be exposing what that intent would be.
Yeah, well, so we all associate to our own experiences. I know mainly in our part of the state, so Garrett County is included in here. I can tell you in Garrett County, Garrett County's minority population is so small, and frankly, their Republican registration domination is so big, it wouldn't matter what district you created and who voted, you're going to wind up, with what it is. The same way in some of the counties in the Baltimore-Washington corridor, we understand, from a political standpoint, it doesn't matter really how we carve the districts up. That's just people's choices and preferences.
Exactly.
Politically. And that's just what I wanted to make sure is that the bill won't require counties to go to a district method. And if counties want to choose after the bill, or they can just choose, tomorrow, even if the bill doesn't go through, they could still go to a countywide method. Some counties like to have the districts because they don't want people to all be from one town, so that one city or one community has the bulk of the population and they get everybody elected from there, and other places feel like they're not considered. But your bill won't change either of those two things. It would just say if you choose to do it district by district, the only votes that count are the votes from your district.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing the bill, and I'm glad that Delegate Buckle was able to kind of clear up some of that, because I want to make sure things that weren't, it's only the ones that are already listed so far that are doing it, or if you choose to do it.
Correct.
Okay. So one of the aspects, when you serve on a county board of Education, especially when you're dealing with children in schools and where the schools are set up, district lines aren't clear. Like, we obviously serve with a lot of Frederick City. Those city lines aren't clear. They don't match the districts. Your attendance boundaries don't. So I always like to think of it as like one county that you're looking out for, and I'm looking out for like all the kids in the county, not just the schools where I live.
Right.
And that's kind of how I had to do like my budgeting hat. So do you have any concerns as far as that goes? Or because they're already doing it like that, we just want to make this more
Yes,
fair?
I understand your question. And again, I do know that, okay, yes, we're still elected to represent not just the folks in the district, but we're also advocating for students in general, which of course is always our goal. For example, all of us, yes, we are state delegates, but we're fighting for Marylanders.
Yep.
And whatever we do does not just affect the district, but it affects the entire state of Maryland. So although we may have various issues that span the gamut, but at the end of the day, generally, in a myriad of ways, it's going to affect the entire state.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Delegate Long and Crosby, for bringing the legislation to us. It sounds like what we did in Charles County a few years ago. My question, I was trying to figure out the boards of ed that are cited. Are these the boards that are commissioner districts, or these the boards that are countywide versus district-wide? Because I know that for us, we were able to do, because we're code home rule, the county itself, no, I correct that. We had the legislation here about 3 years ago to do exactly what you're doing, to have the district board members be elected via district, and it certainly worked for us. So again, the counties that are identified are the ones that have countywide versus district only.
Yes, I can answer that question for you, and I'll give you a two-pronged response. But with the exception of Montgomery, which is a charter form of government, all the others that are mentioned here are commission forms of government, a mama may I form of government, so to speak. So they, of course, would need the authorization for any kind of legislative functioning and component. But yes, this is to give these commission forms of government that type of structure and framework.
May
Correct. Thank you. And Madam Chair, if I may, I also want to just address a couple of things, one more thing, rather, just very briefly. I do know that I don't represent all of the jurisdictions that are listed and mentioned, but I do want to lift up that I do have another version of this same bill that I look forward to coming back, which is a Calvert-only bill. But nonetheless, I do believe it is a very important piece of legislation, especially because this body took on a daunting task in 2021, which of course was crafted and written the same way as this school board bill is, which covered all the counties. And so I'm just bringing it back in that same way, with the exception of not for commissioner races, just school board districts.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, we do have Mr. Bariano here to testify unfavorably.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Madam Vice Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, Bruce Bariano, here on behalf of Queen Anne's County, and only Queen Anne's County, in opposition to that portion of the bill which covers Queen Anne's County, which is on page 4 and page 5. This bill is mandatory. This bill is telling Queen Anne's County to change their form of government into a Board of Education. The Board of Education members, it's a nonpartisan election. It's done in the general election, and it's done countywide. This bill, as it will apply to Queen Anne's County, would take away the vote of the members of Queen Anne's County to vote for all of the members of the Board of Education. Respectfully, that's wrong. Queen Anne's County, no one's from Queen Anne's County here supporting this or wanting this or asking for this. And I don't know of any problems or anything going on in Queen Anne's County that warrants such a dramatic change of taking the votes away from the members of Queen Anne's County to go to a district system with one member at large. And I would ask, if you want to go forward with the rest of the bill or the other counties or what have you, that's your prerogative. But please respect Queen Anne's County and their form of government, which is working fine, is nonpartisan. And I would ask for an amendment to take that portion of Queen Anne's County out of the bill. Thank you very much. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That concludes the hearing on House Bill 391. We are going to move to House Bill 624. And Delegate Wells' staff person, Matt Kramer, is going to present. I believe he is with us. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 391. We are. Okay, if you could turn off your audio if you're listening to us live, and then turn on your video. Okay, whenever you're ready.
I'm sorry, you asking for me? I didn't hear the beginning.
Oh, yes, yep. We're going to do House Bill 624.
Thank you. Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, members of the committee. For the record, I am Matt Kramer. I am Delegate Wells' Chief of Staff. I'm here to testify on House Bill 624 on the delegate's behalf because she is not feeling well. House Bill 624 would require a statewide voter registration application to include a return envelope with prepaid postage. The applicant may use it to return the application to the State Board of Elections. In 2020, the General Assembly enacted House Bill 37, which mandated that mail-in ballots come with prepaid postage, reducing any economic barrier for voters. Marylanders can register to vote online at the MBA, in person, during early voting on Election Day, or at community registration booths. However, individuals who register by mail using the statewide form are required to cover the cost of postage themselves. According to the State Board of Elections, between January 1st and August 31st of 2024, there were just 3,006 new registration records created as a result of an application received through the USPS process. House Bill 624 would allow for mail-in voter registration forms to have prepaid postage effective June 1st, 2025. Closing this tiny gap will make registering to vote more accessible and ensures that everyone can register to vote without unnecessary financial barriers. So with that, the delegate asks for a favorable report on House Bill 624.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Drayton, for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury and members of the committee. My name is Morgan Drayton. I'm here on behalf of Common Cause Maryland in support of HB 624. We think this is a really simple reform. Maryland already provides return postage for voters who utilize absentee or mail-in ballots. This legislation would...
Oh no, Ms. Drayton, you froze.
Extend that practice to voter registration. Oh no, can you hear me?
froze for a second. Just back up like a sentence or two and start over. You're fine.
Okay. I said Maryland already provides return postage for people who utilize absentee ballots. This legislation would simply extend that practice to voter registration applications as well, which any eligible individual can download and print from the State Board of Election website. During this past election cycle, we saw many voters taking advantage of same-day registration. Obviously, that's something that Common Cause fought very hard to make possible, and we're glad that people are taking advantage of that opportunity to make their voice heard. But we believe that same-day registration should always be used as a last resort, and that we should be proactive and working to make sure that any interested, eligible potential voter is registered far in advance of the election. That will also help to alleviate some of the pressure on our same-day registration judges. We know that the average person who receives and completes a voter registration packet most likely won't remember to take that last step of returning it to the local board. That's why when volunteers are trained to do field voter registration, that training instructs the volunteer to take the completed form from the voter and return it to the local board for them. We believe that this would be a step towards making voter registration more accessible to all overall, and for these reasons, we would request a favorable report. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. We do have Mr. Lang signed up unfavorable. If you'd like to come forward, please.
Madam Chair and fellow members of the committee, my name is Alan Lang from Harwood, Maryland, and I'm against this bill for, I guess my biggest concern is that it's changing the process so that all the applications would be sent to the state board. Currently, if you go online and request it, there's already a pre-form and it's supposed to go to the counties, not to the state. I don't believe the state has the staffing to handle all of these. You know, if you pre-filled out the form and send it all to the state board, they're not geared up to handle an influx of, what did he say, 3,000 people that registered last time? So then they would then have to go and ship them out to the various counties. So there would be all these processing costs involved in doing this, plus I couldn't quite tell about how much it would cost. The fiscal wasn't available when I looked, and I just saw it briefly. I think it said $5,000 to $10,000 would be the cost to implement this. And it seems like a lot of processing to put in a prepaid postage for so few people. Is it truly that big a problem for people to find a stamp and put on the form? The form already exists online. I know some people don't have the ability to go online, but there's people who can do this for us, like I think the person from Common Cause says, but it just seems like a lot of work to do, and it would overburden the State Board of Elections. I would urge you to, if not reject this, then at least modify it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Lang? Yes, Delegate Roberson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to be clear, you would be in favor of an amendment if it said directed to the County Board of Elections?
Right, but you would have a lot of more programming to be able to put in 24 different to pre-address the form. Right now, if you do this, all 24 addresses are on the back of the form. It says County Board of Elections, but then you just have to handwrite it yourself and affix a stamp. So perhaps it would be better if you put in the postage, but don't pre-address it. I don't know if that would be that much of a burden for people to look up what address to send it to, but right now I think it would be a burden on the state board to have to process thousands of new registrations and then have to farm them out to the other 24 local boards.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 624. Delegate Grammer, House Bill 680.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'll get started with your permission. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Delegate Robin Grammer here to present House Bill 680. House Bill 680 requires each municipality to require voter registration for its elections and prohibits illegal immigrants from voting in municipal elections. Expressing your voice through your vote is the primary agency for accountability in our democratic republic. It is how average people influence policy. It is how we protect our freedoms and ensure the government doesn't overstep its bounds. Allowing illegal immigrants to vote in elections devalues the franchise and diminishes voting power of U.S. citizens. House Bill 680 attempts to fix this problem. First, it requires actual voter registrations for municipal elections. Current law allows for administering and maintaining a supplemental list of those individuals who are not on the statewide voter registration list, but who may actually otherwise be qualified to register to vote with the municipal corporation. That's the actual statute. Somehow, municipalities have lists of voters which includes those in the country illegally. That is extremely problematic. Lastly, the bill prohibits the participation of those in the country illegally from participating in municipal elections. Those in the country illegally shouldn't have the franchise of electing those responsible for writing the law. The ballot box is the last refuge for protecting freedom. We should value it and protect it at all costs. With that, I'd be happy to take questions, and I would ask for a favorable on House Bill 680.
Okay, Mr. Lang, do you want to come forward? He's in favor. And then we'll take any questions.
Madam Chair and fellow members of the committee, my name is Alan Lang from Harwood, Maryland. I support this bill. Some may argue that since a subset of non-citizens are contributing to society and even paying taxes, that they should have a voice in selecting their municipal leaders. I highly disagree. A citizen of the United States should have more rights and privileges than non-citizens, both legal and illegal. Besides voting, what else distinguishes a citizen from a non-citizen? Non-citizens can own property, they drive, they have a lot of the same constitutional rights that we have. If non-citizens can be given the most sacred right of a citizen, that is the right to vote, why should non-citizens even bother with going through the time-consuming and costly process of naturalizations? Please enter a favorable report for House Bill 624.
Okay, are there questions either for Delegate Grammer or Mr. Lang? Okay, thank you both. We do have
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Westbrook, you'd like to testify unfavorably for 2 minutes, please.
Hi, my name is Viviana Westbrook, and I'm an immigration attorney, daughter of a Mexican immigrant mother, and I have spent time working with Rise Coalition of Western Maryland and elsewhere educating on this issue. And because of this, I ask that you vote unfavorably on HB 680. This bill would undo all the hard work that many individuals, organizations, and communities have dedicated to giving local voting rights to non-citizens in our localities. This is something that we are allowed to do by law. The federal law does prohibit that anyone who is not a citizen can't vote at the federal level, but that very same law allows states and localities to make the decision on state and local elections. That is what many municipalities in Maryland have decided to do. Empowering immigrants to have a say in the places they call home, places where they live, work, study, pray, shop, and more. Voter suppression has never shown the best of who we are. We know that so many of our cities have large immigrant populations. There are places where immigrants make up even 40% of our population. Imagine having such a large portion of your community not having a say in issues that impact their day-to-day lives. And why? Because we attribute U.S. citizenship with merit instead of uplifting human dignity and empowering immigrants to become involved in civic engagement. As an immigration attorney, I have primarily worked with survivors of gender-based violence. One of the main reliefs available to survivors is the U visa. Because of outdated legislation and politics, it will currently take someone applying today somewhere between 2 to 3 decades to become a citizen. Do they not have a say in their community until then? Immigrants are people who contribute to our society every day. They should not be political pawns, but rather should be uplifted and empowered because as our communities become more involved and more powerful, we all benefit. Forcing a belief that the right to vote needs to be earned neglects the common good, erodes solidarity, and promotes equality in a community. I thank you very much, and I urge you to vote unfavorably on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 680. For our final bill of the day, Madam Vice Chair, House Bill 710, and all the witnesses are virtual. So she does have a panel, so I'll just call them up. Actually, I can give you this list. Okay, let's just take a couple minutes. We'll get your first panel all up on the screen. So everybody, just relax, stretch. Thank you. Good vibes. Thank you. Signal today. Breathe in, breathe out. We're cracking jokes. I see. Very much. Question. Okay, we have your first panel up, Madam Vice Chair, so whenever you're ready, you'll begin, and then we'll call on the folks virtually.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of this distinguished committee, for the opportunity. For the record, I'm Delegate Janelle Wilkins, and I'm pleased to present House Bill 710, the Voting Rights for All Act. This legislation removes the prohibition on voting for Maryland citizens serving time for a felony so that every Marylander, regardless of their conviction, is able to retain the right to vote. This bill is about the unalienable right to vote, that right should not be taken away regardless of a criminal conviction. The right to vote is not a privilege for those The right to vote is not a privilege for those who we decide are good people versus bad people. It should be a right for all people in Maryland who are citizens and of age to vote. As a reminder, currently in the state of Maryland, anyone awaiting their trial or who is serving time for a misdemeanor is currently able to vote in our state. So this bill is, sorry, there's a disruption in the committee room. Hold on a moment. What is, Madam Chair, can I start over? Y'all, this is like important. I don't know what is going on over there. Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee, I'm going to start from the top so that everyone can hear this important testimony. For the record, again, I am Delegate Janelle Wilkins, and I'm pleased to present House Bill 710, the Voting Rights for All Act. This bill is about the unalienable right to vote. The right to vote should not be a right that we give to those who decide are good people versus those who decide are bad people. This bill repeals a provision in our code that prohibits those who are serving time for felonies from being able to vote. Currently, anyone who is in a Maryland correctional facility, either awaiting trial or serving time for a misdemeanor, has the ability to vote currently in our system. What this bill does is it also extends that ability to vote to those who are serving time for felonies. Everyone deserves a say in the policies and decisions that impact our lives, and it's really critical that we join states like Maine and Vermont and others and build on our work of enfranchising those who are serving time behind bars. I truly hope that this committee is able to move forward with this bill. It's one that is near and dear to my heart because the underlying premise of this bill is ensuring this right to every single Maryland resident, regardless of their conviction status. I urge a favorable report on House Bill 710, and I do want to refer the committee members to the written testimony where you'll see a breadth of support from groups from the League of Women Voters, the Carey School of Law, Human Rights Watch, Baltimore City Mayor Brandon Scott, and many other supporters. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and we'll start with Ms. Emanuel for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, members of the committee. My name is Yanette Emanuel, Public Policy Director with the ACLU of Maryland, here in strong support of House Bill 710. Voting is a fundamental right and the cornerstone of our democracy. Yet for too long, it has been unjustly denied to those incarcerated with felony convictions. This policy is not just an oversight, it is actually rooted in a long history of racial oppression. Out of slavery came an effort to maintain white supremacy by blocking the political power of Black people through mass incarceration, racist policing, and the deliberate linkage of voting rights to imprisonment. Felony disenfranchisement laws were never about justice, they were about exclusion. They emerged from the Jim Crow era alongside poll taxes, literacy tests, and all designed to suppress Black political power. Disenfranchisement laws have a clear disparate impact of the Black vote across the country, here in Maryland, but most starkly for Baltimore City. Black Marylanders make up roughly 30% of the state's population, yet over 70% of the state prison population is Black. In 2022, Maryland's disenfranchised population totaled 16,587 people, with Black people making up 11,678 of that figure. Compounded with the racial disparities is the further diluting effect of Baltimore City's overrepresentation in prison and jails. As of January 2019, almost 30% of all Marylanders in prison were from Baltimore City. Our criminal legal system should not determine who is worthy of participating in our democracy. The legitimacy of our government depends on ensuring that every citizen has a voice, regardless of their incarceration status. So with that, we urge you to pass this bill and ensure that Maryland no longer perpetuates an unjust and discriminatory system. Thank you and pass this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Porter for 2 minutes, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair Atterbury, Madam Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the committee. For the record, I am Nicole Porter, Senior Director of Advocacy with the Sentencing Project, and am requesting a favorable report on House Bill 710. The Sentencing Project thanks Delegate Wilkins for your leadership and primary sponsorship of House Bill 710. I have submitted written testimony, but want to focus my comments on the community safety benefit and reform momentum. There is a community safety benefit to expanding the vote to persons completing their sentence. Voting is among several pro-social behaviors for impacted persons, like getting a college education, that is associated with reduced law enforcement contact. Having the right to vote or voting is related to reduced recidivism for persons with a criminal legal history. Felony disenfranchisement ignores the important distinction between legitimate punishment for a crime and one's right as a resident who may be otherwise eligible to vote. Persons with felony convictions may be sentenced to prison, but they generally maintain basic rights. To the extent that voting is an extension of free speech, consider that a person in prison may have an op-ed published, perhaps with greater impact than casting a single vote. Advancing House Bill 710 would cement Maryland's place among states that have blazed the trail to expand voting rights to persons with felony convictions, ending this Jim Crow-like voting ban. Maryland is one of 26 states and the District of Columbia to expand voting rights to about 2 million persons since the late 1990s. And Maryland would be the first state to affirmatively expand voting rights to persons completing their felony prison sentence, joining Maine, Vermont, Puerto Rico, and Washington, D.C. For these reasons, I respectfully ask for a favorable report of House Bill 710, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Ms. Levi, for 2 minutes, please.
I think she's on mute.
Oh, ma'am, you're on mute.
Apologies.
It's
Good
okay.
afternoon, Chairman and delegates. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of HB 0710. As a justice-impacted individual who served 16 years of an original 400-month federal sentence, I was privileged to serve 9 of those years as a federal resident at the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women in Jessup. During this time, many of us gathered together to discuss pending legislation, writing, or advocating in support or opposition to legislation that essentially affected all aspects of our lives, both inside and outside the facility. We contacted our families, we wrote legislators, we lobbied organizations to offer our input and to have some influence. The one thing we couldn't do that would ultimately make a difference was vote. With the passage of this bill, more than 16,000 residents serving felony sentences will be able to have a decisive impact on not just their lives, but the lives of their families and all Marylanders. During the past 4.5 years since my release in 2020, working with such groups as the Maryland Justice Project, Out for Justice, We All Vote, Maryland Cure, we traversed the state, educating and registering formerly incarcerated individuals. I say educating because many did not know that upon release or incarcerated for misdemeanor offenses, their voting rights had been restored in Maryland. Now we look forward to continuing that work to educate and register those serving felony sentences to vote. Restoring that right will be another milestone in Maryland's progressive leadership in criminal justice reforms. I urge you to vote favorably on HB 0710, allowing Maryland to join Maine, Vermont, Puerto Rico, and Washington, D.C. in restoring the essential right to all. Thank you, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Mr. Quarles, for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Antoine Quarles. I'd like to thank everybody for their input and social being formerly impacted. Run an organization called Hope Baltimore, helping oppressed people excel with support and transition and educate around religion barriers as in disenfranchisement, but there is a way to safely transition. House Bill 710 is very accurate to me because basically a lot of people, as everybody said, a lot of people really didn't know, even myself, until I came home. And given this process gave me a chance to live out here and not only be a returning citizen, but be a resident citizen and take a part in my citizenship and educate other people while they were coming out, while going back inside and talking with them on the phone. Many still don't understand it and say why, but it's so many that need it, they want to do it. And as we see people come out, the numbers have grown trajectory. Working with partners like Common Cause, Out for Justice, Citizen Policing Project, Maryland Justice Project, just a numerous of people and just removing the ban from voter block because it was a disenfranchisement. I think this process should be done, supported, because it was a voting process that's put us in disenfranchisement to make us reintegrate and take claim of our citizenship and our human right.
Okay, we do have another panel after this and a few more people, but there's some questions for this panel or the delegate. So we'll start with Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for bringing the bill. So just a real quick question. So your bill, just to be very clear, would allow someone who's serving time for a felony to be able to vote?
Correct.
So I'm looking at the matter here with Gerard Ramos. He's an individual that murdered 5 people at the Capitol Gazette. attacking democracy, attacking free press, and who permanently ended those 5 individuals' opportunity to vote ever again. Would this individual be allowed to vote under this bill?
Is this person in prison?
Mm-hmm.
This bill, regardless of whatever conviction someone has, we can go through all of the different types of convictions that people are serving felonies for. Regardless of the type of conviction that someone has, this bill ensures that everyone has the right to vote. That person that you were referring to, their sentence is imprisonment. We have a system of justice in the United States of America and in Maryland, and their punishment should be that they should spend the rest of their life in prison. That is their punishment. What this bill is saying is that the right to vote is not a punishment or a benefit, that it is an unalienable right that every U.S. citizen has, regardless of their crimes. And just like that person that's serving time that you mentioned for those crimes, there are other people who are serving felonies for lesser crimes who are also not able to vote. And under this bill, everyone in the state of Maryland who is a resident and eligible would be able to vote.
So just to affirm then, the individual who permanently eliminated 5 other individuals' ability to ever vote ever again or see their family or contribute to society should be allowed to vote under this bill.
I think I answered the question, Delegate, and to reiterate, the premise of this bill is that we are not taking away and deciding on the right to vote for people. That is a right that U.S. citizens have, and it's not about who we decide is a good person, who we decide is a bad person.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question, Delegate Wilkins, as to the logistics of it. So as you probably know or may know, 2 of the state's largest prisons are in my district, the North Branch Correctional Institution, where 75% of the inmates there are there for murder or some derivation thereof. It is a supermax prison officially. And the Western Correctional Institution, there are literally thousands of individuals incarcerated there. Are they my constituents now under the bill? Do they, despite the fact that none of them, well, I can't say none of them, there certainly could be some folks who were born and raised in Allegheny County who are in those facilities, but I think statistics would bear out that the vast, vast majority of people incarcerated in those facilities have never lived a day in their life in Allegheny County. Some of them, because they have life sentences without the possibility of parole, will never live a day in their life as free individuals in Allegheny County. Do they get to vote for me? Do they get to vote for Allegheny County Commissioner? Do they get to vote for our local judges and state's attorneys and law enforcement positions? Or if they would have the ability to vote, do they vote in the jurisdiction in which they lived at the time that they were incarcerated? Because you can see that there are no, for example, to the best of my knowledge, there are no state correctional facilities in, say, Montgomery County. So in your district, there are none of these individuals who would be incarcerated that would get to vote in your district's elections or for your county, state's attorney, or whatever. But the vast majority of the prison facilities in the state are, in fact, in more rural or ex-urban communities. So how would that work?
That's a great question, Delegate, and we have a sense of that because, again, people who are currently incarcerated for misdemeanors and those who are pretrial are currently able to vote in the state of Maryland. And so we have examples of how the voter registration works. And how it would work is that, no, all of those individuals would not necessarily be your constituents. They register at the place that they consider to be their residence. So if they're returning, the place that would be their residence is currently what the process that the State Board of Elections utilizes now, and that's what we would continue to utilize in terms of where they would register. So those individuals would not necessarily be your constituents. It would be where their residence was before. For people who may be serving a longer time or may be there for life, we would utilize the same thing that we utilize for the census, which is the last known address. So that would be our best example, because remember, those individuals are counted by the U.S. Census at their place of their last known address, and we would follow that similarly under this as well.
So I want to make that clear, so that the individuals that were incarcerated, if they had the ability to vote, they're a voter and they're voting for the communities from which they lived at the time of their incarceration. It's very difficult. People in the correctional system will tell you. It's really hard to tell when someone's in jail for 5 years, 7 years, 15 years, where they're going to live the day they get out, because they don't know. until the very end of their time. They have a plan. The life that they had before they got incarcerated, that may be gone. Their family, their connections to that community may not exist anymore because just the time period. So I wanted to make that clear. And then the only states, I believe you said this, Maine and Vermont are the only states that currently allow this. And the District of Columbia, it's not a state, but obviously is jurisdiction of the United States. Places like Delaware, Virginia, Pennsylvania, all around us, they follow more, at least my understanding of what our current role is, that you can be restored to the right to vote after you have been, most of them sometimes after you've been released, some if you've been have to be off parole probation. They don't follow our local area other than DC. They don't follow this kind of process. Is that fair?
Right. The majority of states have some type of voter restoration, but the states that currently allow those who are serving time for felony convictions to be able to vote are the ones that you mentioned: Maine, Vermont, Puerto Rico, which is not currently a state, maybe in the future, and Washington, D.C. as well, in terms of that would be the one that's closest to us.
And I just looked it up. A lot of the witnesses in support have talked about racial components of incarcerated individuals. But from what I looked at, the states of Maine and Vermont have extremely low minority populations. So they chose to do this, didn't really have anything to do with racial issues or racial balances in prisons because they just have very, very small minority communities. Is that fair?
Well, because this bill would apply to Maryland, I think that we should look at the data for Maryland, which is that Black people are 30% of the population in Maryland, but represent 72% of the incarcerated population. So this would have a huge racial impact when we look at who is incarcerated and potentially who this would impact.
Okay, I appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a technical question. So in Maryland, there's also a provision that says if you're convicted of buying or selling votes, which on my understanding is a felony, that you need a pardon from the governor in order to have restoration of your voting rights. So the bill as written, would it do away with that? Because that falls under the felony?
Under this bill, buying or selling votes is still prohibited action from being able to vote.
Okay, so that would stand.
That would stay in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this, I'm not trying to be redundant or anything, so obviously different life sentences. A life sentence, some have the ability to have parole, some don't. So even if it was life without the ability to have parole, you would be in there, you would still have the right to vote back in your community of which you're potentially never living out in again.
Right, the community where your family may be. We also, I think, should not underestimate how engaged people who are incarcerated are. I receive communications all of the time on legislation from people who are behind bars weighing in or sharing conditions that they're facing within prison. Again, these are individuals that, depending on where they're based, we're all receiving funding because of the census and the way that we allocate funding. These individuals are counted as people, as residents, as citizens when it comes to the census. And all of our formulas that we work on, whether it's tax dollars, whether it is various programs that are coming to our communities, we are benefiting from that because they are counted at their last residence. They should also have a right and a say in terms of voting as well.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing them up.
Delegate Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for the bill. And big shout out to Antoine. Always a pleasure to see you, brother. My question has to do, a few questions. First, isn't it true that prisoners are counted as it pertains to congressional districts or census tracts and funding? Therefore, given that understanding, would you argue, or could it be argued, that that thus creates a taxation without representation scenario?
That is absolutely true.
Secondly, what evidence have you heard of that supports the notion of denying voting rights as a penological purpose or benefit to public safety? Are you familiar of any?
It's actually quite the opposite, that when we engage people, when we include them in things like voting and allow them to be productive members of society, that we see reductions in crime. So it's actually quite the opposite.
Indeed. And lastly, more practical, to the question about where an individual would vote, certainly that might be something we might want to look at. You know, if you are incarcerated for life, you may never return to where you were. Would you all be open to some sort of an amendment that might maybe potentially limit, in certain circumstances, certain individuals to like statewide elections, or, you know, where they may have that impact, and maybe not so much the local or municipal elections?
You're saying restricting them to not be able to vote in certain elections?
So like, for instance, if you're going to be incarcerated for life, you know, you might not come back to your home jurisdiction. You might not go back to Hyattsville, right? So maybe you don't need to be able to vote in Hyattsville election anymore, but certainly statewide would apply because you'll always live in the state. So would that be something that you and the coalition might be open to considering and talking about?
I think that's something to think about, but I think that gets back to the original issue of the bill, which is for us to have voting rights for all. So maybe we can talk about it a little bit more offline. I also realize I didn't give my panelists an opportunity to respond. So Madam Chair, if it's okay for that last question, if anyone wanted to add anything.
Okay, if we could have, who would like to respond?
I think I would just add that I mentioned earlier that the population size we're talking about is around 16,000 people. The majority of these individuals will be returning back. The lifers population is a much smaller number of people. So when we're talking about the figure about how many people will be coming home, would be closer to around, who have eligible sentences that would allow them to return back to their communities, around 11,000. So the majority of these individuals will eventually be returning back to their communities.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, are there any other questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, thank you all very much. If you could just give us a second to bring in the second panel, we will do that. Okay, Ms. Cooper, if you would like to go ahead and testify for 2 minutes, please.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Monica Cooper, and I would like to ask a favorable vote on HB 710, election laws for incarcerated individuals. My name is Monica Cooper. I'm the founder and executive director of the Maryland Justice Project. Maryland Justice Project works with women and girls incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. I am a twice elected official. In 2018, I ran for the Democratic State Central Committee and won. I ran for re-election in 2022, where I received an overwhelming amount of support from registered voters. As a formerly incarcerated woman, I know better than most what it feels like to not be able to chart your future or have a say in the process. One of the first things people returning home do is register to vote. I can't say enough about how important voting is to formerly incarcerated people. The other thing I wanted to mention is something called the budget. The budget deeply impacts incarcerated people. Funding or lack of funding determines what programming, treatment, services, and services that are available to people trying to successfully enter society. All incarcerated people should be able to vote because they are directly impacted by everything from health care to school to social services. People inside have children who are attending public schools, parents who are aging, and they and their families need good health care. Incarcerated people have the same concerns that people who aren't incarcerated do. And I just want to share a brief story with you guys. During my incarceration, Bob Ehrlich was running for the governor's office. And I called my grandmother, who's, God bless her, she's 95 years old, just turned 95 December the 9th. And I asked my grandmother, could she, well, in my mind, I wanted to, I'll say that in my mind, I wanted to ask her, would she cross party lines, staunch Democrat, and vote for this Republican? And of course, I didn't ask her to do that because I didn't want to get kicked out of the family. But I say that to say that people who are people who are incarcerated have a vested interest in what happens. The budget, for instance, Corizon was the absolute worst health care provider for incarcerated people. Everybody inside knew it, and I knew it. And as a result, finally, lawmakers got it and removed Corizon as a health care provider. But all of those things impact people who are incarcerated, and they should have a voice. Our families right now are serving as a proxy for us. Our family, loved ones, and friends, for all of you lawmakers, we talk to
Thank
our
you.
families.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay,
Thank
but
you.
before I do, I did want to say it's really good to see you, Delegate Atterbury. I haven't seen you in a long time since Judiciary. So, and I was wondering how you were doing. So, good to see you.
Thanks. Good to see you too. My grandma's 95 as well, so I love to hear that. Okay. Next we have Trina Selden, please, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Trina Selden, and while I serve as founder and executive director of Out for Justice, which is an organization dedicated to dismantling barriers to reentry and advocating for the rights of justice-impacted individuals, today I speak not just as an advocate, but as someone who has lived the reality of incarceration. I speak for myself and the countless individuals behind bars whose voices remain unheard, whose dignity remains unrecognized, and whose fundamental right to participate in our democracy remains unjustly denied. When I was released from prison in 2003, I was determined to rebuild my life, but I quickly realized that my punishment didn't end the day that I walked out. I faced systemic barriers that made reintegration difficult, and one of the most disheartening was the denial of my right to vote, despite being eligible. I was misinformed, discouraged, and feeling as though my voice had no longer mattered in a society that I was expected to return to. That experience fueled my commitment to advocacy, and it led me to found Out for Justice, where we fought to educate not only impacted individuals, but also legislators and State Board of Elections about the urgent need to restore voting rights. One of our earliest campaigns was to ensure that all Marylanders, regardless of their past convictions or current incarceration status, had the right to vote. And yet here we are 20 years later, still fighting the fight for that same fundamental right. In 2014, Maryland General Assembly overwhelmingly passed Senate Bill 340, which would have restored the right to vote to all citizens upon release from prison. That progress was erased when Governor Larry Hogan vetoed the measure. Today, we are advocating for something more critical, the restoration of voting rights for those currently incarcerated for felony convictions. Restoring hope, investment, and agency. We ask that those returning from prison to work, pay taxes, and abide by the law, yet we continue to strip them and those who are still incarcerated of the most fundamental rights of citizenship. If we expect justice-impacted individuals to be productive and engaged members of society, we must give them the ability to participate fully in our democracy. For those currently incarcerated, voting is just not a political act. It is an affirmation of personhood. It is the acknowledgement that their voices, their experiences, and their perspectives still matter. Many people serving felony sentences feel discarded by the very system that claims to pursue justice. Restoring their right to vote does not erase the past, but it invests in their future. It gives them a stake in policies that shape their families, their communities, and their own lives beyond the prison walls. When we allow incarcerated individuals to vote, we send a clear message that rehabilitation is real, that redemption is possible, and that democracy belongs to everyone, not just those on the outside.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay. It is my prayer that this year, we make history not only by restoring the right to vote for all Marylanders who are otherwise ineligible, but by affirming that every person, no matter their past, is worthy of dignity, investment, and agency in shaping the world that they live in. And I urge a favorable report for House Bill 710. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have Walter Lomax with us? Okay. We'll have Mr. Lomax for 2 minutes. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Oh, there
for 2
I am.
minutes.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair Atterbury. Like Monica, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you since, well, actually, I had the heart attack down there. Let me say this. First off, this bill is very, very important. My written testimony addresses the technical aspects of why the legislation should be passed. But I want to share with you, because this legislation would have far-reaching effects from just allowing an individual to vote. And I say this because when I was currently incarcerated, we started our legislative initiative where each individual knew what legislative district they were from, who the senators and delegates were in those legislative districts, and began to contact them and begin to empower them. And when we started the proxy vote, where they would let their family members and friends know what legislator that was in favor of the legislation that we were advocating on behalf of, it began to change their behaviors significantly. And even right to the day, some of those same individuals that was incarcerated at the time are right in Annapolis advocating for changes in criminal justice policies. And I say that is because what they were able to do while some of them were still incarcerated was to assist us in getting the parole reform legislation passed, because they were politically a part of the political process. And they also assisted us in getting the Walter Lomax Act, the Compensation Act for people who were wrongfully incarcerated. And so it had far-reaching effects by way of what it would do. It substantially changed the behavior of those individuals that are incarcerated, because having that ability gives them a sense of empowerment, a sense of civil engagement. And so I would encourage you to, at the very least, consider passing this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have Yeswaya Downey with us? Okay, no. Do we have Ann Duncan? Nancy Sorang? Okay, so that is it. We do have one unfavorable, Mr. Lang. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Lomax? Okay, thank you. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Lomax.
My pleasure.
For 2 minutes, Mr. Lang, please.
Madam Chair, fellow members of the committee, my name is Alan Lang from Harwood, Maryland, and I would like to enter an unfavorable report. I believe someone convicted of felony should have drastic consequences. And in addition to losing one's freedom, one of these consequences should be losing the ability to vote while imprisoned. There's various reasons, but I'd like to spend what little time I have on the bill's title. I haven't heard one person talk about the hotline and what it would do, how it'd be implemented, how much it would cost, how would the state board keep this operational. When you think of a hotline like the suicide hotline, you expect someone to be there. I don't think prisoners would be able to stay on hold for a while or be able to get callbacks. Who's going to staff this hotline, and how is it going to work? Perhaps there was a fiscal report that was put in after or within the 2 days before I prepared testimony. I didn't get a chance to look at it, but again, the title of the bill's hotline. It looks like a dodge to me to get around the, so that people might ignore this bill. So what are people going to do for the hotline? So please put in an unfavorable report for because I don't think the hotline is going to work and be worthwhile to. It looks like this is just a way to get all the prisoners to vote, and just by calling it a hotline bill.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lang? Committee, I skipped over two folks that are here in favor. They're here virtually, and we appreciate their patience. Michael Pinard and Nina Casninuas. I totally messed that up. So Nina. Okay, Mr. Pinard, go ahead, please.
Right, well, good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and committee members.
My name is Michael Pernard. I'm a professor at the University of Maryland Carey School of Law and faculty director of the Gibson Bank Center for Race and the Law. The Gibson Bank Center works collaboratively to reimagine and transform institutions and systems of racial inequality, marginalization, and oppression. We request a favorable report on HB 710 for a few reasons, which are detailed in our written testimony, but I'll offer some highlights. So as you well know, voting is the highest form of civic engagement. It allows us all to have an active voice in our democracy. Yet throughout U.S. history, there have been various tools used to deny the franchise to Black residents, such as outright bans, poll taxes, and literacy tests. And through these tools, disenfranchisement further cemented white supremacy. And denying voting rights to Marylanders who are incarcerated is part of this tortured lineage. It connects directly to this long history of Black disenfranchisement. Indeed, disenfranchisement based on felony convictions began immediately after the Civil War, when Black codes were enacted to criminalize all forms of Black life. Black codes and disenfranchisement based on felony convictions went hand in hand. So fast forward to today, given the gross overrepresentation of Black people in Maryland's prisons, carceral disenfranchisement is essentially another form of race disenfranchisement. However, beyond race, HB 710 is important because it recognizes the dignity and humanity of individuals who are incarcerated. The bill cherishes the value of all voices in the affairs of our democracy, and all of us who vote appreciate the power and worth of speaking directly in furtherance of our democracy. Every time we vote, we feel fulfilled and appreciative. We look forward to voting, and we wear our stickers proudly. So ending carceral disenfranchisement will bring us all closer together, regardless of our circumstances. So for these reasons, we request a favorable report on HB 710. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just gonna say Nina, and I apologize.
No worries. Good
Go
afternoon,
ahead,
Madam
please.
Chair. My name is Dr. Nina Castanunas. I'm an associate professor of political science at Goucher College, and I have taught in the Goucher Prison Education Partnership since 2018. In that capacity, I have taught at least 6 courses between our campuses in MCIJ and MCIW. In many of my courses, I teach students how to write in the policy realm. No matter the type of policy writing, without fail, the #1 issue students want to write about is their disenfranchisement. I stand here before you because they cannot. I want to speak about the academic research. It supports what much of what has been said and what we know. Many individuals who end up in prison have had a negative relationship with government and very negative interactions with the state. Without any intervention upon release, those individuals will likely still have a negative relationship with the state. How we treat individuals while they are incarcerated predicts a lot about how these individuals will engage in their communities upon release. If we don't give people the ability to develop their sense of agency in a positive manner while incarcerated, we can't expect them to be positively engaged in their communities afterward. And let's be clear, they had the right to vote, and those rights were taken away during the Jim Crow era. Stripping prisoners of their voting rights does nothing but reinforces the negative relationship they already have with the state. Reenfranchising incarcerated individuals alone won't ensure that all will be productive, engaged community members upon release. And in fact, the evidence shows there probably will not be a surge in voting either. However, not stripping people of their right to vote communicates a lot about how we see incarcerated individuals, and reinstating these voting rights is a necessary step in redirecting the relationships with the state in a more positive direction. I ask for a favorable report of HB 710. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you all, and that concludes the hearing on House Bill 710, and that concludes the hearings of the Ways and Means Committee today. Thank you.